something other than me. So,
alright,
diseases and
afternoon Earth. This is Adam Sturch broadcasting from Garage Art, Taos, New Mexico. We are in between Allsup's and Outback Pizza on whatever side of town that is. This may be Garage Art's last week, so I'm gonna pan around and try and promote it and hawk my shit. Been here for a couple of years. Owner's getting weird. He's gonna be up here next week, so I don't know if this is still gonna be happening even as soon as next weekend. So if you need any art, I'm trying to get rid of this stuff as quickly and as cheaply as I possibly can before it all gets thrown in a fucking dumpster. So anyway, thank you for your support online, and to those of you who have come in over the course of Garage Art's evolution, and soon, hopefully,
meaning that it divides wholes into parts.
Before its death. Anyway, today we're working on, here we are. We've got some scarlet red mixed up, and I'm going to continue with scaling. Here we go.
Molecules. And that's how it is. And this isn't a new perception about Western medicine. In 1977, Dr. George Engel, an American physician, internist, and psychiatrist, said that the dominant model of medicine today is biomedical, with molecular biology its basic scientific discipline. And what I'm trying to say to you here is that the critique that I'm going to make tonight of Western medicine and in providing an alternative, it's not new, actually. People have been saying this for a long, long time. So here's George Engel saying that the dominant model of medicine today is biomedical, with molecular biology its basic scientific discipline. It assumes disease to be fully accounted for by deviations from the norm of measurable biological variables. It leaves little room in its framework for social, psychological, and behavioral dimensions of illness. The biomedical model embraces mind-body dualism, the doctrine that separates the mental from the somatic. And let me just give you 3 medical facts here, and you'll see immediately how inadequate and insufficient the Western medical perspective is in explaining these facts that I'm about to give you. The first fact is a study that was done in the United States last year, or I should say 2 years ago now, that showed that the more episodes of racism an American black woman experiences, the greater her risk for asthma. Now you can't explain that on molecular grounds. You just can't. Let me give another fact. In the 1930s and 40s, the gender ratio of multiple sclerosis, which is a inflammatory degenerative disease of the nervous system, was 1:1. In other words, for every man, there was a woman diagnosed. You know what the ratio now is? It's 3.5 women to every man. Now that immediately tells us, A, it can't be genetic, because the genes don't change in a population over 7 decades or even 10 decades or longer. Number 2, it can't be diet, because that doesn't change for a population. It didn't change more for women than for men. Nor can it be the climate. There's something going on. And whatever it is, it can't just be biological. Now, what's interesting is that when you look at how you treat asthma, is you give, to open up the airways and to suppress the inflammation that happens in the asthmatic airway, you give inhalers or medications by mouth, which are copies of adrenaline and cortisol. Adrenaline and cortisol are the stress hormones of the body. I'll talk about them later. They're secreted by the adrenal gland in response to a threat. So there's adrenaline and cortisol. So we're treating asthma with stress hormones. How do we treat multiple sclerosis? If you have a flare-up of your multiple sclerosis, you're going to get an infusion of the stress hormone cortisol. If you've ever been to a dermatologist with a skin flare-up, some kind of chronic psoriasis or eczema, most of the time you're going to get a steroid cream, a copy of cortisol. If you go to a rheumatologist with inflamed joints or connective tissues, guess what they're going to give you? Steroids, cortisol, in all autoimmune diseases. I could go on. So here's the interesting question. We're treating all these conditions across medicine with stress hormones, but we're not asking ourselves a simple question. Is it possible that stress may have something to do with the onset of this condition? Has something happened to the body's stress apparatus that we have to give people now larger quantities of stress hormone to keep them from having symptoms? And of course, as in the case of the racism-induced asthmatic attack, we can see that obviously emotional factors must be playing a role here. And not just emotional factors, because the black woman who experiences racism isn't an isolated particle responding to nothing in the environment. She's affected by a social circumstance, a social, economic, political circumstance. And so George Engel, in 1977, called for what he termed a biopsychosocial approach for medicine. And he said, the boundaries between health and disease, between well and sick, are far from clear and will never be clear because they're affected by cultural, social, and psychological considerations. That was 1977. And that wasn't new either. In 1940, another American physician said that social and psychic features play a role in every disease, but in many conditions they represent dominant influences, and that mental factors represent an active force in the treatment of patients as active a force in the treatment of patients as chemical and physical agents. And that wasn't new either, because back in Roman times, the Greek physician Galen already pointed out that women who are depressed are more likely to have breast cancer. And now we have the actual studies to show why, and I'll refer to them later. So what I'm saying is that this awareness, this intuitive awareness that you can't separate the mind from the body.
That's probably pretty much impossible to see what I'm doing there. So I'm going to zoom into the upper portion. Just remind me as I work my way down
we have the science to actually prove it.
To move my camera.
And what is remarkable and lamentable at the same time is that despite the scientific evidence, medical practice still doesn't take into account. And let me show you to what degree it doesn't.
Right.
So I'm going to ask you a question. Raise your hand.
1, 2.
If in the last, say, 5 years or so, you've been to a respirologist, a gastroenterologist, a cardiologist, a neurologist, or a dermatologist, any kind of an ologist, just put your hand up, okay? Great. Now, thank you. Now, put your hand up again if they ask you about any stress in your childhood. One person, that's fantastic, 1 out of 1,500. Put your hand up if they ask you about any trauma you experienced. Same person, you went to a good doctor. If they ask you about your relationship with your partner or spouse. If they ask you about how you feel about yourself as a human being. Same person. And if they ask you about any stresses at work. And I'm telling you, that's how bad it is. Because every one of you, I would say, well, I don't be too dogmatic, maybe only 98% of you, who went to see one of those specialists went there because of those factors that they never asked you about. And that's what I want to talk to you about now. So I was 20 years in family practice before I did addiction medicine, and for 7 years I did palliative care work, looking after terminally ill people. And so in my experience, I began to notice that there were certain patterns as to who got ill and who didn't get ill. And these patterns just kept reasserting themselves over and over and over again until they became inescapable in my awareness. And what these patterns were, I'll illustrate for you by means of some newspaper clippings from the Canadian newspaper, the Globe and Mail, for which I wrote a medical column for a number of years. And these stories from the paper illustrate aspects of what I call the disease-prone personality. The first is a first-person story written by a woman called Donna, who's diagnosed with breast cancer, and she goes to her doctor, and she's describing the experience of the diagnosis. What you need to know is that her doctor's name is Harold, and her husband's name is Hai. Now, Hai's first wife died of breast cancer, and now Donna, the second wife, is diagnosed with the same condition. And Donna writes, Harold tells me that the lump is small, and most assuredly not in my lymph nodes, unlike that of Hai's first wife, whose cancer had spread everywhere by the time they found it. You're not going to die, he reassures me. But I'm worried about Hai, I say. I won't have the strength to support it. Now, what's wrong with this picture? So here she is diagnosed with a potentially serious condition, and she's the one who might need radiation, surgery, and or chemotherapy. And the first thought that she has is, how will I look after my husband's emotional needs? So this automatic and compulsive concern for the emotional needs of others while ignoring your own is a major risk factor for disease, for reasons that I'm going to tell you. The other segments I'll cite for you now are obituaries. And obituaries are fascinating because they tell us not just about the person who died, but also about what we as a society value in one another. And what we value in one another is often what kills people. You've heard the expression, the good die young. They often do. And there's a reason for it. So many of you are relieved having heard that. This is a physician who died at age 55 in Toronto. Never for a day did he contemplate giving up the work he so loved at Toronto's Sick Children's Hospital. He carried on with his duties throughout his year-long battle with cancer, stopping only a few days before he died. Now, again, if a friend of yours is diagnosed with a malignancy, is that what you would say to them? Go back to work and keep working until you drop? So there's this rigid and compulsive identification with duty, role, and responsibility rather than the needs of the self is another risk factor for illness, for reasons I'll explain. The third obituary, the second obituary I'll read you is about a woman called Naomi. This is written by her grateful husband, and she died of breast cancer at age 55. And the husband writes, in her entire life, she never got into a fight with anyone. The worst she could say was phooey or something else along those lines. She had no ego. She just blended in with the environment in an unassuming manner. Now, my wife Ray, I think, is in the audience, and we were married 50 years this year. And believe me, there'll be many times when I wish that she would blend in with the environment in an unassuming manner, as I'm sure many of you have who have partners or spouses of any type. But if your partner wants to stay healthy, they will not blend in with the environment, and really what's being described here is a repression of healthy anger. And the repression of healthy anger, we know, suppresses the immune system. And it's literally the commonest characteristic that I've seen in people with malignancy and autoimmune disease. When I say repression, I mean that they don't even allow themselves to experience the anger. And the final obituary I'll read you is, you'll have to really take my word for it that I copied this out verbatim from the newspaper. This is a man called Sidney. He was the physician at age 72 of cancer. Sidney and his mother had an incredibly special relationship, a bond that was apparent in all aspects of their lives until her death. As a married man with young children, Sidney made a point to have dinner with his parents every day, as his wife Rosalind and their 4 kids waited for him at home. He would walk in, greeted by yet another dinner to eat and to enjoy. Never wanting to disappoint either woman in his life, Sidney kept having 2 dinners a day for years, until gradual weight gain began to raise suspicions. And this is presented as a wonderful example of loyalty to the parent. And what is actually being described here is a poor man who suffered from 2 fatal beliefs. And when I say fatal, I mean literally fatal. One is that he's responsible for how other people feel, and 2, that he must never disappoint anybody. I'll give you one more example, which is actually a British one. It's from the TV series The Crown, which I'm sure many of you have seen. It's a wonderful soap opera about the Windsor family. And as you know, the current Queen's father, King George VI, ascended to the throne in 1936 when his brother Edward abdicated to marry his divorced American sweetheart. His name wasn't George, his name was Albert, Bertie. He did not want to become king. He did not. When his mother, Queen Mary, told him about the coming abdication and that it'd be up to him now to assume the royal throne, he writes in his diary, I'm sorry, when I told her what had happened, I broke down and sobbed like a child, he said. He didn't want to do it. Now, in the Crown, in the TV series, there's a conversation between his mother, Queen Mary, and his wife, the now deceased Queen Mother, Elizabeth. And the mother says, now, of course, he died of cancer. He was a smoker and he died of lung cancer. There was a British surgeon in the 1960s called David Kisson who noticed, just like I noticed, and there's many physicians have noticed, these patterns in their clients. And he noticed that he was operating on people with lung cancer. And of course, the more you smoke, the greater the risk of lung cancer. Now Bertie, or King George, who became King George VI, was a smoker. But Kisson also noticed that these people also suppressed their emotions, particularly their anger. And he did some studies, and he actually found that the more you suppressed your emotion, the less cigarette smoke it took to trigger the cancer in you. Now, going back to the Crown, so here's the Queen Mother, I should say King George's, Albert's mother, talking to his wife, and she says, the mother says, one can only be thankful for the years one had with him. So wonderfully thoughtful and caring, an angel to his mother, wife, and children. I honestly believe he never thought of himself at all. He really was the perfect son. Want to be the perfect son in the British royal family? Don't think about yourself. Don't think about yourself. So I think that what we need is a broader view of medicine. And so the perspective that I'm going to present to you here is along the lines of what George Engel called the biopsychosocial perspective, which simply says that the biology of human beings can't be separated from their social and emotional processes, dynamics, and environments. Let me give you an interesting example from the animal world. In an ant colony or a bee colony, there's the queen, right? And the queen's job is to produce the eggs. And she's bigger, and people bring her food, and she really is the center of the hive's solicitous attention. Do you think there's something different about the queen? No. Genetically, she's the same as all the drones. It's just that because of the demands of the hive, she develops the characteristics of the queen. And if you take the queen out of the hive, of an ant colony, for example, one of the drones will develop into the queen. Biologically, they will change. In other words, the biology of the individual utterly reflects the needs of the group. And that's also the case in human life. So 3 years ago, I had the pleasure, or 2 years ago, we were being in Britain, in London, presenting at the Breath of Life conference, and one of the co-speakers was the great trauma psychiatrist, my friend of mine, Dr. Bessel van der Kolk. And Bessel says in his book, The Body Keeps the Score, our culture teaches us to focus on personal uniqueness, but on a deeper level, we barely exist as individual organisms. Our brains are built to help us function as members of a tribe. And that's not new either, because if you go back 2,500 years to the Buddha, the Buddha talked about what he called the interdependent co-arising of phenomena. And he said that every phenomena arises in relationship to every other phenomena. You can't separate anything from anything else. And he said, contemplate the nature of interconnected co-arising during every moment. When you look at a leaf or a raindrop, meditate on all the conditions, near and distant, that have contributed to the presence of that leaf or raindrop. The birth and death of any phenomenon, he says, are connected to the birth and death of all other phenomena. The one contains the many, and the many contains the one. Without the one, there cannot be the many. Without the many, there cannot be the one. And so the perspective I will propose here for you is that biopsychosocial perspective. And from that perspective, illness is not an entity in itself. It is actually the manifestation of a person's life in a certain context, to which many factors contribute, but the psychological cannot be separated from the physical, and the physical and the psychological aspects of the individual cannot be separated from his or her social connections and existence, and therefore from the culture that they live in. And if you're going to be fully inclusive about human beings, and I'll have to bring in another dimension, which of course is heresy in medical terms, which is the spiritual one. And so basically we're biopsychosocial spiritual creatures. And spiritual simply means that there's more to us than the little ego that many of us are hung up on, and which rules this particular society. The second point I'm going to make for you is that disease is not a fixed entity, it's a process. And that process is not separated from that person's life. So that how the multiple sclerosis will behave is not simply a characteristic of the disease. It reflects what's happening in the life of that particular individual, which is, by the way, why we're seeing 3 times as much in women right now, which I'll talk about later. But it's a process. And if it's a process that somehow manifests how we're living our lives, then we can actually perhaps do something about it. And I'm not here trying to give you an alternative to Western medicine, which has many wonderful achievements to its credit and can perform miracles really, as we all know. But there's something missing. And what's missing is that we don't know from the Western medical perspective how to promote the healing process within the patient, himself or herself, or themselves. And from that perspective, illness is not just meant to be battled. It's meant to be come to terms with, understood, inquired into as to what its message is. And from that perspective, illness is a potential teacher. And that invites and actually necessitates an inquiry. Now let me give you another British medical fact. Stephen Hawking, the physicist who died, 2 years ago, in his mid-70s, of ALS, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, or known in Britain as motor neuron disease. Do you know he was diagnosed at age 20? You know how long he was given to live? 2 years. He should have died well over 50 years ago. Something didn't figure in the equation, did it? Otherwise he would have succumbed much longer. And many people do succumb, of course. But I know people like Hawking who have long survived ALS and have done even better than he did in terms of physical functioning.
All right, so I think it's a pretty good thread of red
a life of its own
throughout most of it.
It does manifest
are from
life
end
and
to end,
functioning and social circumstances
so
of
right
the individual.
We'll see.
Let me talk to you about another British person. I can talk to you about ALS.
Scale patterning
as an interesting example, but
so I'll be back.
I'll leave it for now.
Common meditative mental
and we're back.
practice in
There's kind of a medium turquoise mixed up.
People are not doing it in these traditions primarily, so they can be more successful in love and business.
And we're just going to stop or start at the top.
They see meditation as a way of getting to the very ground of consciousness itself. In the Hindu tradition, the idea is that the source of everything, the whole universe, is conscious. God is a conscious being. The supreme being is conscious. That's the primary attribute. And that all consciousness within the universe is a manifestation or reflection of this divine consciousness. A familiar analogy that the Hindus use is of buckets of water at night. You can have hundreds of buckets of water outside on a moonlit night. And if you look in those buckets, in each bucket you can see a reflection of the moon. And it looks as if there are lots and lots of different moons. But actually there's just one moon reflected in each bucket. And so they say the one consciousness is reflected in each of us and in all other conscious beings in the universe. And through meditation, by coming to the ground of consciousness itself, you can come into contact with the ultimate divine consciousness, which is inherently blissful, which is why mystical states are usually blissful, supremely joyful, and enormously powerful. Now, of course, most people, when they meditate, including me, don't reach those states all the time. In fact, for me, they're rather rare. Most of the time, I still have thoughts going through my mind. I try not to, I pay attention to my mantra and don't become attached to them. They float through the mind, the attachment can get done. Exercises can composting this inner dialogue and these thoughts. But there are moments when it can be, can be moments when there's this sense of great peace, connection and joy. So for atheists who meditate, it's all just about changing the way the brain's working. For those of us who are not atheists, it's about opening our consciousness to a greater consciousness. And I think that some atheists who meditate through their own experiences may actually change their view of consciousness. After all, the idea that consciousness is nothing but the brain is something most people accept on blind faith. No one's ever proved it. It's simply part of the materialist worldview. And when Sally referred to blind faith in religions, I myself am a practicing Anglican. I meet very few Anglicans who have blind faith. But the minute I enter a scientific institution, I find lots of people with blind faith, particularly blind faith in the materialist assumption that the mind's nothing but the brain. Well, we have a choice. In interpreting our own experience of connecting with a greater consciousness than our own, we can either trust our own experience, which is direct and is direct evidence, or we can put our faith in an intellectual theory, the materialist worldview, which has as its weakest point its inability to understand the nature of consciousness. Consciousness is the hard problem for materialism, as philosophers of mind describe it. So, in meditation, although it can be a helpful practice without even thinking about its wider meaning, if you do think about it, it can be a portal to a much greater worldview if you're coming out of a materialist worldview. I myself was converted to the materialist and atheist worldview through my scientific education, and it took quite a while to come out of it. And meditation has been one of the things that's helped for many years. I want to contrast meditation with petitionary prayer. Petitionary prayer is asking for things, and petitionary prayer is present in all religious traditions. But in the modern world, it's probably rarer than meditation. And how many people here pray as opposed to meditate? Well, that's interesting. You see, it's probably about 20% or maybe 30% compared with 90% meditating. I do both myself. And I think prayer meditation is now much more common. 50 years ago, it would have been exactly the other way around. And I don't think one's right and the other's wrong. I think they're both important. In fact, I compare them to breathing in and breathing out. Meditation, I see, is a bit like breathing in. You let go of your concern with the outer world. Many forms of meditation, you close your eyes. And then the thoughts that are going through your mind, you detach from those by focusing either on your breathing or sensations in the body, as in mindfulness meditation, or a mantra, as in mantra-based meditation. Then you try to let go of those thoughts till you come to the basis, the ground of consciousness itself. So that's like breathing in. Now in petitionary prayer is working in the opposite direction. You start by connecting with a form of consciousness greater than your own, by invoking a greater being. Our Father, who art in heaven. Hail Mary, full of grace. Om Namah Shivaya. You start with an invocation of a greater being. And then you focus your intention in the context of that greater being on the things you want to ask about. You may want to ask for protection. You may want to ask for guidance. You may want to ask for healing for people you know and love, or for yourself. You may want to ask for help in examinations or in interviews or in giving a talk or whatever. People have many things they want to pray about and ask for, or for your pet animals to get better, or for safe journeys. In prayer, what you're doing is connecting a spiritual source with everyday concerns. Many of the things that you're praying about are quite mundane. But they're practical and they're important. And I think that we actually need both. I think if you only meditate and without any sense of prayer, then it can become a bit detached from ordinary life, and all those problems go on unresolved. If you only pray and don't meditate, then you're really involved all the time with outer problems, and you don't have that retreat into the calmness which is so refreshing. So I personally think it's important to do both, and I myself meditate in the mornings and I pray in the evenings before I go to bed. And because I pray about all the things that are worrying me, by the time I've finished praying, I'm not worried anymore. I leave the problems to God. So you could think of this as a naive coping mechanism, but it actually works. And it means that I usually go to sleep quite quickly and don't worry, and find that it helps me in my life a great deal. There's also scientific studies that show that people who pray regularly tend to be happier and healthier. In one study in America of 65-year-olds, they found two groups of people two groups of people matched for age, occupation, health status, etc. Half of them prayed regularly, the other half didn't. And 6 years later, the ones who prayed regularly had a 60% better survival rate and were less prone to depression, substance abuse, alcoholism, etc. So there are not only health benefits to meditation, but health benefits to prayer. And as I say, I think both of them are important. And if you're religious, then you have a chance to pray with other people in churches or synagogues or mosques or temples. If you're not religious and don't go to church or synagogue or mosque or temple, then you can pray at home. But I find it, I do both. I find it helpful to pray with other people. It's difficult to do that without embarrassment outside a religious context. But I find it very helpful to do both. And again, I don't think it's either or, I think it's both and. Now, I want to turn to rituals. And there are many kinds of rituals, but there's one major category of rituals which are rituals of remembrance. And these are rituals which help people to belong to a social group. By taking part in these rituals, you affirm your membership of a social group. You become connected to others, not just now, but to all those who've done it before. For example, in America, shortly, they have the Thanksgiving ritual. It's a national ritual rather than a religious one, although it is Thanksgiving to God, but it's not in a specific church. It's a national ritual. By taking part in this Thanksgiving dinner, Americans affirm their identity as Americans, and they connect with those who've done it before them, right back to the first Thanksgiving dinner of the first settlers in the New World, who gave thanks for surviving a year, their first year in the New World, against many adversities. And this is part of their national ritual. Without doing it, they wouldn't feel as American. And for new immigrants to America, through taking part in this, it helps to integrate them into the tradition of being American and affirms their American identity. For Jewish people, taking part in the Passover ritual is, again, a way of affirming their identity as Jews. By taking part in this, they affirm their identity as part of a Jewish culture and tradition. And in the Passover dinner, there's always the telling of the story of the first Passover on that fateful night in Egypt, when the Jewish people, under Moses' instructions, killed a lamb and smeared its blood on the lintels and the doorways of their houses to protect them, and then ate it in haste with bitter herbs, because that night the firstborn of the Egyptians and of their cattle were killed, and they were spared, they were passed over. And then the Pharaoh said, "Go, I don't want you here anymore." And it was the beginning of their journey to freedom through the wilderness to the Promised Land. And that story is reenacted every year in the Passover dinner with lamb and bitter herbs and the telling of the story. The Christian Holy Communion itself, a Passover dinner, reenacts the Last Supper of Jesus with his disciples. And those who take part in it enter into communion with those who are sharing that meal with them. It's a shared meal, a sign of communion or eating together. And are also connected with all those who've done it before them, right back to the first Holy Communion, and with those who'll do it afterwards. So rituals connect us across time with the myth, the founding story of the group, with other members of the group, and with all those who've done it before. In every culture we find rituals, and rituals have a conservative character. The ritual has to be done in the right way, and the ritual languages are very often very conservative. The rituals of Brahminic India are in Sanskrit. The rituals of the Russian Orthodox Church are in Old Slavonic. Jewish rituals are in Hebrew. The rituals of the Coptic Church in Egypt are in ancient Egyptian, the only form in which that still survives today. And the ritual gestures are also conservative in the format of the ritual. Why should this be so? Well, I think there's a scientific basis for this. This is in my own hypothesis of morphic resonance. I don't have time this evening to go into the nature of this hypothesis. I'll just very briefly summarize it. I know it's provocative and so on, and if you're not familiar with it, it's going far too fast. But for those who aren't familiar, I just want to give a flavor. It's basically the idea there's a memory in nature. Nature is governed by habits. which build up as the cosmos evolves. The conventional scientific theory is that all the so-called laws of nature were there at the very moment of the Big Bang, like a kind of cosmic Napoleonic code, and they've never changed since then. What I'm suggesting is that they actually evolve along with nature, and the word law is intensely anthropocentric. Only humans have laws. Modern science is deeply anthropocentric, obsessed with human metaphors, laws, and machines. Only humans make machines. Habit is a much more general metaphor. Lots of creatures have habits, not just us. And so I think there's a kind of memory in nature. Each species has a kind of collective memory, a bit like Jung's idea of the collective unconscious. And when Sally reminded us about Jungian archetypes, I would see those as examples of this collective memory in our collective unconscious. So the process by which this memory works is, according to my own hypothesis, called morphic resonance. Morphic means shape or form. Resonance means an automatic connection with similar patterns of vibratory activity. So anything similar in the present will resonate with previous similar things in the past. So a baby giraffe, as it grows up, will resonate with previous giraffes. When it's an embryo, it resonates with the form of previous giraffes and takes up its shape, its form. And then later it takes up the instincts of giraffes by a kind of collective memory. The genes enable it to make the right proteins, but they don't explain its form or behavior. This is obviously a controversial theory, but it sheds a lot of light on rituals, because by doing rituals as similarly as possible to the way they've been done before, then I think the people who are doing them come into morphic resonance with those who've done them before, and there's literally a presence of the past through the ritual, which is just what people think they're doing when they're carrying out rituals. And so I think this makes very good sense in the light of morphic resonance. Now there's a particular class of rituals that I want to mention, which are rites of passage, where you pass from one state to another, from not being born to being born. That's the most primal rite of passage. From being single to getting married. From being alive to being dead. These are the most fundamental rites of passage, and since we're in a cemetery chapel, which is also used for weddings, it seems appropriate to reflect on them right here. There are also rites of passage about passing from adolescence to adulthood. And in many cultures, these are associated with the imagery of death and rebirth. You die to your old social role, you're born in a new form. Many rites of passage have this format, dying to your old self, going through a liminal region, a region of transition and a danger, and then coming to a new integration in your new social role. Well, in things like North American vision quests and in trials by ordeal in Africa and elsewhere, it's not just an imagery of near-death experiences. People do get very close to death. Some people actually die during rites of passage. So they are about near-death experiences. So we actually know a lot more about near-death experiences now than people did before, thanks to scientific studies. Near-death experiences are much more common than they ever were before, thanks to modern medicine. Many people who would have died of coronary failure or of accidents don't die now. They're resuscitated thanks to modern medicine, accident and emergency rooms, and coronary resuscitation. And many people who've been resuscitated say they've had near-death experiences. Typically, as many of you will know, they find themselves floating out of their body, looking down at an operating table or the scene of the accident. And then, in a second phase, going through a tube or a tunnel and emerging into a realm where they feel blissful, joyful, it feels filled with love. They often meet beings of light, sometimes deceased relatives. and they feel utterly blissful. But it doesn't last, because it's only a near-death experience, so sooner or later, usually sooner, they have to go back into their body, and then they can talk about it afterwards. Now, many people have had these experiences, and most people who've had them say that it's changed their life. Follow-up studies of people who've had near-death experiences show that many of them say that they've lost the fear of death, they've become much more spiritual, much keener on helping other people, and many of the people in their families say they've noticed this big change that's come about through a near-death experience. So near-death experiences can be transformative. They are transformative for many people. Now, what I'm going to suggest now is that some rites of passage deliberately induce near-death experiences precisely because they're so spiritually transformative. And the one that I think is most familiar, at least in name, to us in our Western culture is baptism. St. John the Baptist, as the New Testament tells us, was baptizing people on an almost industrial scale. People were flocking to the River Jordan, where he was baptizing them by holding them under the water, bringing them up again, and their lives were transformed. It was the first great spiritual awakening for Jesus himself, according to the New Testament. That was the moment when he first became aware of his intimate connection and with God. That was his spiritual rite of passage, baptism. Now, this is usually interpreted as symbolic death and rebirth, death by drowning and rebirth symbolically. But why settle for something that's merely symbolic if you can have the real thing? It only takes a couple of minutes longer. And what I'm suggesting is that John the Baptist was a drowner, and that he held people under just long enough to induce a near-death experience. And then their lives were totally changed, really changed. Not just imagining a change, but changed through an experience. Now, of course, he may have lost a few, but by the time Jesus came along, he was very experienced and really knew what he was doing. But that was before liability litigation. And so I think that when we see it in the light of a near-death experience that was induced, deliberately induced as a rite of passage, it makes complete sense. Within a few generations, the early Christians had stopped this form of baptism. They went in for infant baptism, sprinkling water on babies, or in the Orthodox Church, immersing the baby, but very briefly. So this was lost, this particular rite of passage. But in the ferment of religious fervour in the Reformation, one group of people, the Anabaptists, reinstituted this. They read the New Testament.
I jumped down to the lower half of the last bend. I might have been off camera there for a minute. How much time I got left? 7 minutes. All right, so it's taken about half an hour per top to bottom for one thread of one color. So it's going to take a little while to get that upper portion in, but it's coming along. I'm going to do another scale or two on the lowest portion. There we go, lowest.
They died, they'd seen the light, and they'd been born again. I think they really had. And I think for them this was a really powerful experience. Didn't go down well with Orthodox churches, either Protestant or Catholic, and they were persecuted all over Europe, which is why as soon as they could and the opportunity arose, many of them emigrated to America, where they founded the Baptist churches that still exist there, including the Mennonites and the Amish. And these are the groups of Christians which still to this day talk about dying and being born again and seeing the light. Very rarely hear Anglicans or Catholics talking like that, but Baptists talk like that all the time, because for them this conversion experience as a rite of passage is a living tradition. How many today still go to the point of nearly dying in baptism? I don't know. It would be a very interesting study. I rather suspect that health and safety regulations, fear of litigation, etc., probably greatly diluted this, but I think that the history of Anabaptists and Baptists in the past suggests this was something that really was going on. And we've now lost that sense of rites of passage, and I think that's one reason that they've been reinvented or have come back through psychedelics. Many young people today take psychedelics, often
so
in
I guess the
very
turquoise
ill-advised
threaded through,
circumstances,
but wasn't off camera for much
because,
of that, if at all.
They want to experience
Kind of lost track.
a change, a transformation of their minds.
We'll pick out a different color and do it again, or maybe do some broad stroke detailing. I'd kind of like to fix the horizon line of the black hole scape, because I introduced another layer of mountains last time, so maybe I should fix that a little bit. But otherwise, I just really want to focus on these scales, because that's going to take quite some time, and once again, that's just the foundation of what I want to do next. So,
I wanted to explore
no rush.
consciousness without.
Take a minute.
I wish I knew the answer to that question.
All right.
Because obviously,
The next step, I'm going to cut a horizon of bright pink
I think that the
into the mountainscape or into
I
the
think
black
one
hole
step is
scape.
to recognize that we're interconnected with each other and interconnected with the planet. And that, after all, is a realization which is dawning on a lot of people now. I mean, when I was growing up, everyone just believed in progress. And when I first became a scientist, I believed in progress too. Science and reason and technology lead humanity to a brighter and better future. The only cloud on the landscape was sort of DDT and toxic chemicals. But most people didn't give a thought to the pollution caused by jet travel, car travel, carbon emissions, burning coal, burning gas, all these things. And then single-use plastic came, and it was just convenient. And most people just used it and thoughtlessly threw away tons of plastic every year. Well, we still do all these things. But now, people are becoming much more aware of the negative effects of these. I myself, I now think twice about going on planes. In Scandinavia, thanks to Greta Thunberg, they now have this thing called plane shame. And I think we should all have plane shame. It's one of the worst things I and everyone I know does, because you're emitting the carbon fumes right into the atmosphere. Planes are extremely wasteful of energy. And right now, people are rewarded for flying more frequently, frequent flyer benefits. In fact, it should be exactly the other way around, frequent flyer taxes, people should be penalized for frequent flying. I think that there's changing awareness. People are becoming more and more aware of single-use plastics. I mean, there's still far too many of them, but supermarkets are feeling they should at least show some signs of shifting towards non-wasteful use of plastics. So I think part of it is coming about through these changes in attitude. Extinction Rebellion's done a great deal to raise awareness of them. Now, of course, that's not going to stop the Indians and the Chinese building more and more coal-fired power stations. And the Chinese are building lots of them in their Belt and Road Initiative in dozens of different countries. And it's very hard for us to go around the rest of the world and say, well, look, we've had all the benefits of reckless use of fossil fuels and reckless use of the world's resources, but you can't do it because now it's bad for the planet. I think all of us have to make differences in our own lives. Traveling less, wasting less, consuming less, changing our diets, because eating lots of meat is one of the things that is highly destructive in the whole planet. People have to change their diets. And lots of people are. I mean, the rise of the vegan movement in Britain is astonishing, and lots of people eat far less meat than they used to. All of these things, I think, changes in individual behavior, but also there have to be changes in economic and political behavior and legislation. And, things like, some things, signs are good. I mean, the fact that wind power, offshore wind power is now cheaper than fossil fuels as of a few months ago is extraordinarily good news, I think. And right now, these offshore wind farms produce so much electricity when it's windy they have to shut them down because it would burn out the national grid. But actually, the next stage they're already talking about and should be doing something about soon is to have hydrogen-making plants where the electricity comes on shore. When there's too much, it's easy to make hydrogen. You put electrodes into water, salt water, and hydrogen and oxygen gas come off. And this could then be burned when there's not wind, or used to fuel jet planes or cars in a way that's not environmentally destructive. So there are technological possibilities. I'm hopeful about those, but it's not hopeful when you look at some people in the political world, like the President of the United States, who continue to deny there's a problem and who are in fact trying to unravel environmental legislation. It's obviously an enormous struggle, and I think all of us have to take part in it to the best of our ability.
Rupert, can you hear me?
No, I'll come here. The loudspeakers all point this way, and I can't hear from... Oh, if you come up here, Trevor, yes.
My name's Trevor. I have a question. We're clearly interested in God. I just wondered if you thought God was interested in us.
Oh, well, I think that, it depends what view you have of God. I see God as sustaining all being from moment to moment, the ground of being, and also the root and source of all forms and patterns in nature, and also the source of all the energy in nature, breath, wind, air, energy, sunlight. I see God as in nature and also beyond nature. And we're part of nature, we're within God, and I think that God is inevitably interested in us and indeed in everything else, because we're within the divine being. Now you see, this is a different view from a view that sees God as external to nature and only intervening occasionally. A view that came about in the 17th century. In the medieval theology, most people in the Christian world and in every other religious world assumed that God was in nature as well as beyond nature, a view that's called panentheism. God is everywhere and everything's in God. The idea was that we live in a living world. In the Middle Ages, plants had souls, animals had souls, the earth had souls, the planets were alive, the stars were alive, every star had its own intelligence, an angel that guarded it and looked over it and was its creative intelligence. When medieval people in England looked up into the sky, they didn't see lots of stars that were just hydrogen bombs obeying natural laws. They saw a living heavens filled with the presence and being of God, with every star a kind of intelligence. And in the 17th century, with the scientific revolution, all of nature became a machine, mechanical, made up of dead, inanimate matter, just working mechanistically. And then what role had God in this kind of world? Well, he didn't have much. His main role was to do with human morality, because the only thing that was open to God in the whole of nature were human minds, according to Descartes. Cartesian dualism split God from nature, so the whole of nature was inanimate and mechanical, including human bodies. And God, angels, and human rational minds were the only things that were non-material, and the only thing in the material world that wasn't material and that was open to God was the human mind. And God himself was supernatural or beyond nature. So there was an automatic nature going on automatically according to natural laws. God was outside nature, removed from it, accessible only through human minds. and acting only through human minds. Occasionally, it was believed in the past he intervened through miracles by suspending the laws of nature and interfering with the course of nature. But it was generally thought by the 18th century that was all in the past. That left very little room for God. God was extremely remote and had no particular reason to care for us. And then with the rise of deism in the late 18th century, people said, well, the universe needs a God to design the machinery and to fix the laws, but then once he's pressed the start button, he can just retire. So you had a God who had nothing to do with nature or humans. And then along came atheists and said, well, why bother with such a God in the first place? Let's just say the universe is eternal, then you don't need a God to start it off or to make up the laws of nature. Just get rid of God altogether. And that's what happened for many people. So I think if one has a view of God that's a deistic or theistic in the mechanistic sense of theism, 17th, 18th century theology, God's outside nature, and it's not obvious why God would be concerned with what happens in nature. But if you have a view of God as immanent in all nature and in all minds and in all forms of consciousness, then it's a completely different view of being possible for God not to know what's happening. You know, I don't see any reason to assume that the divine, that bad things can't happen, because obviously bad things do happen. The universe was formed in a catastrophic explosion that disrupted its initial unity before the Big Bang. And there's been disruptive forces at work in nature ever since. That's part of evolution. They include collisions, explosions, suffering, decay, death, senescence, disease. All these things are part of the natural order. So I don't expect I don't think of God as a defective designer who didn't design nature properly, so why is there all this suffering in the world? So the view one takes very much depends on the kind of theology one has. And as I say, my own view is that, yes, that we're within the divine mind.
All right, I like that. That creates a lot more depth.
And indeed, they're part of the divine mind. I mean, the whole point of meditation,
okay, we'll cut it there and probably come back
within the
to
traditions that it's
scale.
rooted in, is precisely to bring us into more direct conscious contact with that conscious ground of all things.
I think I'll do another scale session at least.
Rupert,
So,
can you hear me?
set that
Oh,
up.
there you are, yes.
Yeah. Thank you very much. It's Sam here. I don't think we've seen each other for at least 10 years, and I think you're looking very well on your combination of faith and science. So it gives me faith in your exposition. I wonder about in relation to the last two.
Close, and I was beginning to see the effect this was having on my
Alright,
friends.
mixed up some medium yellow
Then
and
was the
white
auto
for a
worker
pale
who put on
yellow,
the cover of that
and we're
magazine
going to
out
start
in San
from top to
Francisco.
bottom. I'm not going to zoom in this time. I think I lost track where it was the previous session with scale work anyway. So I'm just going to leave
He
it
was now shooting hoops at the
zoomed in
local
approximately
center.
to the full scale of the dragon. Here we go.
I just couldn't take it. I told the guy next to me, tell the foreman, I'm sick to my stomach. I don't give a shit what you tell me. I grabbed my coat and I flew out the door, past the guards, jumped into my car, got onto Bristol Road, was flying toward my apartment, and I turned on the radio hoping that might cheer me up. I got like tears coming out of my eyes. And I strike right into the middle of Wouldn't It Be Nice by the Beach Boys. And I'm thinking, what a horrible, horrible song to have to hear in the midst of this panic attack. A song that, usually I would really get a groove going with, And so I'm trying to sing the lyrics. I've got like an apple in my throat, Maybe if we wish and hope and think and pray it might come true, I'm trying to rationalize with those lyrics, trying to think, wouldn't it be nice? And it just wasn't working. Wouldn't it be nice if we were older and we wouldn't have to wait so long? And wouldn't it be nice to live together in the kind of world where we belong?
So the story used today from from the Genesee County Health Department. It announced the rat population in Flint has now surpassed the human population by 50,000. Health officials say that's due to the massive numbers of people leaving Flint and the city cutting back to twice monthly garbage collection due to budget constraints.
Just when things were beginning to look bleak, Ronald Reagan arrived in Flint and took a dozen unemployed workers out for a pizza. He told them he had come up with a great idea, and if they tried it, they'd all be working again.
He suggested that maybe some of us could find better jobs elsewhere, like in Texas or in the southern states. And that's when I spoke up, because I have a son, a home, I'm trying to do it by myself, and I can't just pull up stakes and take off by myself.
We don't hold any public office, we're really nobody special, but he wanted our opinions and our views.
It's at a level that I could understand, and I liked his ideas about, well, the ideas that he voiced to us.
None of Reagan's luncheon guests got back into the factory in the ensuing years, and the only bright spot to come out of the whole affair was the individual who borrowed the restaurant's cash register on the way out the door. Meanwhile, the more fortunate in Flint were holding their annual Great Gatsby party at the home of one of GM's founding families. To show that they weren't totally insensitive to the plight of others, they hired local people to be human statues at the party.
So what's it like here in Flint these days? I think they're tough here for the people that are laid off. There's still people working. I don't think it's as bad as people may believe.
We started something, and we're going to finish it. We're going to be the leaders.
What did we start?
We started an industrial revolution, an art form that's never been created in the history of mankind.
What was that industrial revolution?
The cars, steel. You know, it took off from there. You know, we invented the wheel again. You know, and we're off again. We're running.
So, what advice do you have for those who are having a rough go of it?
Get up in the morning and go do something. Start yourself. Get your own motor going. There's things to do out there.
I don't think it's real fair to just pick on the very negative things and publicize them and not pick up any of the really good stuff.
What are some of those good aspects of life?
The ballet. Your kids were involved in that.
Ballet, hockey. It's a great place to live. Sheriff, everybody home? Sheriff, everybody home? Hello?
I had found one man in Flint with a secure job, Sheriff's Deputy Fred Ross.
I treat a person the way I would like to be treated. You know, like I explained to them that I got a job to do, court issue and all that, not me. If you can make peace with your landlord, good. You know, if you can't, you got a problem. Out here, I put out some good people. You have a lot of people in this town that can $800-900 a month house note. That's a lot of money to try to pay unemployed. just don't want to lose. Especially, you know, older people. Some of them have retired from the shop, and taxes catch a lot of them too. So yeah, if things go down, they close up the plant here. This town will be a rough place.
I continued my search for Roger. I scoured the neighborhoods of Grosse Pointe Woods, Grosse Pointe Farms, Grosse Pointe Park, Grosse Pointe Shores, and Bloomfield Hills. I tried in vain to locate his house, but the name Smith was a common one among these people. I then read that Roger was going to be at the Grosse Pointe Yacht Club. I decided to drop in on the affair.
Roger Smith. You haven't seen her yet? You fine?
Who, Roger Smith?
Yeah.
You want me to call Roger Smith? No, I'm trying to get a hold of the manager to see if anybody knows anything about it.
I'm sure he said the Grosse Pointe. I mean, it wasn't him.
Can we?
It was...
Who, his office?
Yeah, his office.
Why don't you call his office and
Yeah,
find out?
yeah.
I have a television crew down here with Michael Moore. He's supposed to meet Roger Smith at noon. I have no information.
How often does Mr. Smith come here for lunch or for dinner?
Last time I saw him here was for sportsman's meeting.
Yeah, what's that?
It's a wild game dinner.
Yeah. You go out and shoot your own animal.
Pardon me?
You go out and shoot your own animals you shoot, bring here and eat, or?
Well, some of the stuff is donated.
Yeah.
Yeah. The food's like rattlesnake and let me think of some more exotic foods. Alligator.
Eat this stuff here?
Roast beef.
Yeah, well, that sounds better.
I obviously had the wrong yacht club because Roger was nowhere to be found at this joint. I didn't have much more time to waste around here because back in Flint at the county fair, thousands of people were being entertained by the diving donkeys, anxiously awaiting the return of our boyhood hero as he made his triumphant return home to Flint.
From Tennessee, county fair, the newlyweds comes on the road. Here come the newlyweds. Here they come. Yes, it's the newlyweds, and these are out in the trouble for today. Now it's all the hosts and start the newlywed game.
Welcome. How nice of you to come out here today. Welcome to the opening of the fair. Hi, Mom. How are you doing? You devil, you.
What about questions like, how heavy are your wife's breasts? I never asked that question. I will say, how much does your wife's chest weigh? But there's a lot of difference in that question you just asked, and a hell of a lot of differences. And that's where I think we get a bad rap. People like yourself will quote a question like that, and I wouldn't ask that question for anything in the world. I wouldn't even say breasts.
First question. These are the easy questions. Ladies, how much did your husband say your chest weighs? Well, how much did you say your chest weighs, sweetheart? 2 pounds. 2 pounds. He said your chest weighs 6.5 ounces. Yeah. I said both of them. He said that is both of them. I said, I'm sorry. He said, not as sorry as I am. Yeah.
Bob was right. He didn't use that word breasts, and I considered apologizing to him for implying that his show was wholesome entertainment for the entire family.
You know why Jewish women don't get AIDS? Because they marry assholes, they don't screw them apart.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's all the time we have this afternoon. If I made you smile one time, it's been working with me. I had a good time. I hope you had a good time, too. Until next time, we'll be back everybody about 7:30. I'm on you like so long, everybody. See you later. Bobby Legs!
I was born here in Flint, but I don't know anything about it. I can only tell you this about this town, that it's pretty, the people are nice. I don't know much about the economy, but I can take you some places around the United States are a hell of a lot worse off than Flint, Michigan. So I don't think it's such a bad town after all.
With 30,000 jobs now eliminated, the city decided to turn to that one event that had always made us so happy, the big parade. This time honoring the surviving Flint sit-down strikers. The highlight of the parade it was Miss Michigan, Kay Lonnie Ray Rathko. Passing by the dozens of boarded-up stores and hundreds of jobless Flint citizens, she was an inspiring sight to all present.
How do you feel about the economy here in Flint? Factories all shutting down.
This isn't my interview yet. This is my time of enjoyment.
All kinds of important people showed up to march in the parade, like the governor of Michigan, James Blanchard.
How do you feel about General Motors closing up these factories in Flint?
Oh, it's tragic. Tragic.
Do you think we need another sit-down strike here?
I don't know that that'll do any good. That's the problem.
Great time for a parade. I think give your life to Jesus. Jesus Christ loves you. Give your life to Jesus, sir. Tell your viewers that they need Jesus. Give your life to Jesus.
And of course, how could you have a parade for the founders of your union without inviting the current president of the United Auto Workers, Owen Beaver?
I don't know that we need another sit-down strike per se. Sit-down strike today would not necessarily resemble or be able to bring about the same thing that it did in 1979 or 37.
The union is getting weak. Getting weaker. We're losing power. Why? Because there's too many union guys, too many guys in the union that are friends with management. Friends with management.
Some of the plants that are announced to be closed obviously are going to be closed. There's, you know, we have to accept reality that they're just not going to remain open. I think, you know, that with the spirit here, that Flint will continue not only to survive, but will continue to grow.
Some people know what time it is, some people don't.
Miss Michigan, can we talk to you for just 1 second?
Sure. The face looks familiar. Was this when you caught me on the road here?
Yes, we were trying to talk to you back in the parade. How does it feel driving through Flint, Michigan today and so many people being laid off, so many plants being shut down?
How does it feel? I feel like a big supporter. That's how. Does it matter of what?
Supporter of General Motors?
Of just being here for the people. This is it the parade?
But you go past so many stores that are boarded up and people that are laid off. How does that make you feel, just on a personal level?
A little sad, of course. I'm for employment and working in Michigan, and hopefully it's just temporarily. So I just keep my fingers crossed that they'll be back in working soon. I'm trying to stay neutral here. I'm going to Miss America in 2 weeks, and I don't want to...
It's a great day for a parade.
Oh, it's beautiful. It turned out wonderful. I can't believe the crowd. In fact, it's the largest parade I've been in. And I've been in probably over 20 since June. And this is wonderful. I love coming back to Flint. It's my 3rd trip here, and I love it.
Any message to the people of Flint?
Just keep your fingers crossed for me as I go for the gold in 2 weeks, and hopefully bring back a crown for Flint and the rest of the Michigan state.
2 weeks later, she got her wish.
Our new Miss America, Kay Lonnie Rathko, Miss Michigan. There she is, Miss America.
This is probably number 15. I've been here and evicted someone.
From this house?
From this house, yeah. Girl, Sheriff Department. Sheriff Department. You better get your clothes on. We're here to put you out. We're here to put you out. So you better get your clothes on. Evict you from the house right now. You stay up all night, sleep all day.
Deputy Brett seems especially busy these days. After doing 24 evictions in one day, He arrived to evict a woman who was a month behind in her rent. She quickly got the landlord on the phone, and after telling him that a film crew had arrived with a sheriff, the landlord told Fred not to evict the woman and her children.
I mean, it had leaked so much, this whole area here was bulging down. My oldest son, I moved his bed because I was scared that the ceiling would fall, but nobody was over there at the time and fell. It needed to be painted outside. The aluminum siding you see outside, I put on. I paid for and had it put on. See my outside? It does look better.
Oh yeah, you put that on. That's the last time I was here. You spent a lot of money.
Well, it looked like the riotous house on the block, and these houses look pretty nice. And I was embarrassed about it. You know, and the deal was pretty good, so I worked with it.
What's going to happen to this one?
End up taking out. Unless the new husband come up with the money. I can't imagine somebody get married to someone as poor as you. It's kind of rough. Put two poor people in the same house. I always tell women you can be poor by yourself, you don't need any help. And she just got some help being poor.
3 days later, Fred put the woman and her kids out.
Hi, can I help you?
Yes, we've been looking for Roger Smith, and we were wondering if he was here right now.
Okay, I have no idea whether he's here or not, but you are going to have to leave the club.
Why is that?
It's a private club.
You know if he's been here today? Or
To my knowledge, he has not been.
Does he come here often?
I really don't know.
Is he a member here?
He is a member.
He is a member, but you don't know if he's been here recently?
I'm afraid we don't keep track of our membership, but you will have to leave the club, sir. It is a private club.
Well, you know what Roger Smith is.
Sir, we're going to have to ask you to leave the club.
But we just want to find out when you think
I'm
you might.
sorry, you're going to have to leave the club. Call General Motors and check with them.
Well, we have called General Motors.
Fine. Then if you can't get in there, you can't get in here either. Would you mind leaving?
We can just wait here.
No, you can't. So you gotta leave the building, so you gotta step outside. We'll come back. I mean, why do you? Yeah, we'll just go outside. Okay.
Sir, you may wait outside. If he comes in, you can interview him outside. You may not interview him in the club.
The last time he was here.
That doesn't mean anything. I'm sorry. No, that does not impress me. I'm sorry.
It does impress you? The chairman of General Motors is here?
Chairman of General Motors is just another member of our organization. He's an important individual, but he's no more important than any of the members of our club.
I wasn't having much success bringing Roger to Flint. The mayor, though, was having better luck with an even higher authority. He paid TV evangelist Robert Schuler $20,000 to come to Flint and rid the city of its unemployment plague.
Tough times don't last, but tough people do.
Thousands filled the city's hockey arena to hear his message of hope.
Pull your way out of poverty, but you're not going to pull your way from poverty to prosperity until you realize you have to be humble enough to say, I need help. Why, then what happens is you can turn your hurt into a halo. The sorrow becomes a servant. Just because you've got problems is no excuse to be unhappy.
Maybe Reverend Schuler was right. Things could be worse, and there was much to be thankful for, like the Star Theater of Flint, funded with GM money to provide entertainment and escape during Flint's hard times.
Buick City, this is cool. You know what I mean? Rednecks, hard hat, automotive workers. We bring Broadway and the theater to them in this beautiful atmosphere that takes money, time, effort, energy. Wow. Bobby Benton opened our season with 90% sold out. It was a great big hit.
He had very much charisma, came into the audience, spent about 10, 15 minutes with the audience, fussing with the ladies, doing kissing and the this and the that, and they loved him. He got standing ovations every night. Peggy Lee came. She was not the greatest big hit, but she had her cult from all the surrounding areas. Her cult, loved her, loved her. Those who came absolutely loved her. Standing ovations, bravos, cheers, they were crazy about her, you know. Last year, Mitzi Gaynor, we had her here at the show. She brings 10 wonderful boy dancers with her. She makes 14 changes. The 16, the boys make 14. When they're on, she's on. She's on, they're off. They're all changing costumes all the time. One production number after another. And you'd be surprised, some of those hard hat factory workers on the assembly line say, hey, I think just present your badge or your identification so they can come at a half-price ticket. To keep people moving their heavy buttons.
Long before she sold orange juice, Anita Bryant sold spark plugs for General Motors' AC division. She used to perform in Flint for General Motors when I was a child. I remember her carrying around a giant spark plug and singing "You'll Never Walk Alone." Now she was back in Flint, offering her advice to the unemployed.
The opportunities are still in Flint, Michigan, they're still in America, so hang in there and just take one day at a time.
Go forward and be positive about life. Don't be regretful or guilty about the past. Don't fret or worry about the future.
You have today. Today's a new day. It's an opportunity for you to look about you and look at the positive within yourself and within your community.
Take a look at yourself and you will look at others to believe your hand in the hand of faith from Galilee.
I read something interesting. Margaret Thatcher, she says, cheer up, America. She says you live in a great country, you're a free country, you have a great president, and not everything is perfect, but cheer up because you live in a free America. So we live in a free society. Today is a new day. It's an opportunity to do something with yourself. If nothing else, you know, thank God for the sunshine and for the fact that you're not starving to death, and go out and do something with your hands. I don't know.
These are you in your America, nice and unicorn, trying to shout away through the USA. America's the greatest land of all.
Flint is bedrock America. And people here don't quit, they don't give up, and they know that there have been lots of good times in the past, and there's more good, productive time ahead.
You better come home, Speedy Gonzales.
It was like I was reliving my childhood. First Anita and now Mr. Chevrolet himself. Pat Boone had arrived in Flint just when we needed him.
I look the same. I liked you the moment I saw you.
More people identified me with Chevrolet than any other sponsor and any other spokesman. And since my family was getting bigger every year, we were having a baby a year, I needed a station wagon. So each year that I worked for Chevrolet, I had a Corvette and a station wagon to use. And that just strengthened my feeling that this was a great sponsor and a great product, which I could wholeheartedly endorse on television, and did. Hey, take a look at Chevrolet's 58 Corvette. Oh, what a beauty. You know, I want to drive one of these things myself. I can vouch for it. The sweetest handling baby on the road today. Chevrolet's completely new in style. It's the longest, too.
You ever met Roger Smith, the chairman of General Motors?
I haven't. At least I don't think I have. At least if I had, it would have been before he was chairman years ago during my involvement. I don't think we've been.
So you don't know much about him?
I don't know much about him as a person, but he sure seems to be a very optimistic, can-do kind of guy.
Yeah.
He's not a quitter.
Yeah.
Who's to blame for what's happening here in Flint?
Well, I don't think it's anybody's fault. In a free society, in a capitalistic, democratic society, things just do change. There are shifts and trends. I'm sure General Motors doesn't have any desire to either close down a plant or put people out of work. The key becomes the attitude. And folks wind up saying, hey, you know, it was the best thing that ever happened to me with my job at the plant. phased out because I was only going to go so far at the plant, and now I've got my own business, you know, whatever it is. It's maybe no accident that the Amway business, for one, is in Ada, Michigan, offering anybody for almost no, very little money, a chance to start earning dollars, having their own store in their own home.
If you have a dream and you go after your dream, you can do it. If you do it full time, you can really make good money. You can make a lot of money off of these.
Janet was one of hundreds of
All right.
citizens who had taken Pat's advice. She was still working at GM. She'd seen many of her friends laid off and didn't want to take any chances.
That yellow is a
She'd been
little thin,
founder and
a little
host of
difficult
Flynn's
to
feminist
cover
radio
with
show,
a nice opaque
but now
bright
she was a
coat, but I got it
distributor
working
for
all right.
Amway.
But only to about,
color
halfway. So I think I'll pick up there with the same color tomorrow
As soon as I found out what
and call it good
season
for
was,
the day.
it really changed my outlook. I went around draping everyone with my eyes, and I really wanted to get into this
But
business.
that's
It was very
decent
exciting to me.
progress
About 80%
to start
of
the
the world's
weekend.
population is
So thank you for watching all, and once again, if anybody needs any artwork, I've got stacks of paintings everywhere, and we're looking to find some homes for some of this stuff before it is
what I'd like to do is put you
dumpster fodder. So I've got a few set aside that I'm keeping, and everything else I got no clue. So this may be the last weekend for Barrage Art. Thank you again for your support throughout its evolution, and hope to see y'all before it's tossed in the street. Have a good day, Earth.